Okay, we know what we're not doing, so let's be responsible and pick this moment so we can leave these two for later. All right. Ooh, a pool. Fancy schmancy. The pool of Derek's condo complex was a perfect setting for a late morning outing. It was early enough that the day hadn't yet reached its hottest. The air still held the crispness of morning. Despite its pleasantness, only you and Derek were there. Of course, given the location of the ocean, maybe everyone else who felt like waterside fun was at the beach. You usually were. The warm roughness of tiles felt odd on your bare feet as you walked further into the pool area. There was no sand to squish between your toes or sharp shells to avoid. You surveyed the area while Derek finished putting his stuff away on a chair. The chlorine was sharp in your senses and the entire space was so orderly. Lounge chairs sat in neat rows, umbrellas spaced out uniformly. The depth of the pool was marked out in clear text along the sides. Every single element was intentionally and expertly crafted to be convenient for its human visitors. It was extremely different from the wild mistress of the sea. I gotta say, though, there's something about the beach with the waves. This pool was too tame, like it was some kind of big bathtub, and the chemical smell was off-putting. Beaches had so much more than just water. Where were the hidden treasures, the wide open space and vast horizon? Pools made sense when the ocean was a million miles away, but you didn't really have a use for it with the beach basically being in your backyard. This had been Derek's plan. He let you know about it ahead of time so you could be dressed for the occasion. I would have worn a two-piece swimsuit. And a t-shirt and shorts. Your swimming gear was familiar, even if the pool wasn't. You felt prepared. Derek bounded up to you in his own swim trunks, flagrantly ignoring the no running signs in his enthusiasm. Let's look at your swim trunks. Looking cute.
Okay.
Watch! I'm gonna do a cannonball!
As soon as he knew he had your attention, he took off to the deep end of the pool. He built up speed and then leapt into the water. His curled up body created a huge splash on impact. Hooray! You had to appreciate his talent and showmanship. Had he practiced on how to achieve the maximum splash? Such a show deserved a clap. He stayed under for a while longer. He touched the pool's bottom before he kicked himself back upward. When Derek's head popped out of the water, he swam to the edge of the pool and propped himself up with a grin. He watched you expectantly. Cannonball! Like Derek, you gave yourself a bit of a running start. You reached the end, took a deep breath, and leapt as far as you could. Frigid water burst around you, feet first, but soon covering you entirely. You sunk lower into the depths and began to kick. You breached the surface and sucked in the fresh air. You noticed two things. One, that the water wasn't actually freezing when you got used to it. And two, that Derek was clapping for you.
Nice.
You got some serious airtime. I'd give it a 10 out of 10.
Thanks, dude. As you enjoyed the moment, your thoughts fell back to how you'd gotten here. Last night, Derek had called with a different sort of request. You remember that his voice had been a mix of nerves and hope. He had a favor to ask, very unexpected for him. Derek's mom needed him to watch his little brothers in the afternoon. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, but that was part of his problem. Lately, he had feared that his sports skills weren't as sharp as he wanted them to be. He hadn't been able to practice soccer or football without the distraction of keeping an eye on his brothers. His idea to fix this had been to ask for your help watching the kids. Uh-oh. If you agreed to go to the park with him and his brothers, then you could manage his brothers while he had a chance to focus on practice. That's how he explained it. You said yes, and your moms had been more than happy to let you spend the day playing support for Derek. They said it would be a good opportunity to take on some more responsibility. There's the title drop. To sweeten the deal, Derek suggested that you come by early so that you both could hit the pool. Nicolas would be sleeping in, and Jorge would spend some one-on-one time with Mrs. Suarez. So far, the plan had worked out. Ma dropped you off about 15 minutes ago, and both of Derek's brothers were fully occupied. Oh boy, this is gonna get rough. I'm not very good at looking after children. Mrs. Suarez and Jorge were back in the condo, putting together an 800-piece puzzle on the kitchen counter while Nicolas snoozed on the couch. You had time to kick back before the moment came to be in charge of small children. And you'd been prepared for the visit in more way than one, because the first thing you did when you arrived at Derek's house was put 3 wrinkled dollar bills in his hand. I'm paying you back! With that, your debt had been paid. Hooray! I love that the game remembered that. A sloshing sound pulled you back to the present. Derek had climbed out of the pool.
I'm gonna jump again. Wanna join?
Yeah, let's go. You copied Derek's exit from the pool. It took arm strength and caution not to scrape yourself on the texture of the concrete. Oh yeah, true. Once on solid ground, you reversed away from the edge to give yourself enough space for a good jump. Poised to go, you and Derek made eye contact. He leaned forward, balancing on the balls of his feet.
No worries.
I've already done one. It's your turn.
Belly flop hurts so much. As I was saying, Cannonball! You backed up a little more to give yourself more space before going for it. You kicked your feet up, running to the edge, and leapt. Curled into a ball, falling quickly, the air rushed past you, and then you were sinking toward the bottom of the pool.
Whoa!
You stretched out and reached up towards the surface, parting your arms to paddle over to dry ground. Derek was laughing boisterously. It was his turn next. By the curve in his grin and the lift of his chin, he looked to be in a mood to impress. His eyebrows drew together in a deep furrow as he considered his launch. Derek took a few bounding steps to the edge, jumped up, and tucked his body in. Unlike his previous cannonball, the energy went into a spin, and he flipped, making a full rotation before he crashed through the surface. Very impressive. The water droplets from the splash dazzled you as they exploded out from his impact. He swam under the water and only came back to the surface after he reached the wall of the pool. He snaked his hands up to the edge of the tiles and pushed himself up so that his hips were even with the edge. He twisted and practically rolled out of the pool from there.
You're up!
Okay. I'll do the walking off the edge this time. You kept your posture casual, like you were going on a perfectly normal, sedate stroll on perfectly solid surfaces. You went over the edge, and just like a cartoon character who noticed that they no longer had ground beneath them, you dropped like a rock.
Whoa!
You kept switching back and forth, trading off between silly jumps and then more impressive tricks. From watching Derek's well-practiced dives to performing your own jumps, there was never a boring second. After several leaps, Derek called a break time and you took a breather at the back stairs to the pool. You waited for your strained heart rate to even out from all the exertion. After a pause of silence, Derek spoke up. He pulled his fist to his cheek and thought, squishing his face slightly.
So...
Hey, I probably should have asked before, but... Have you ever babysat someone before?
I had babysat quite a few times, actually, by this point. Yeah, sometimes I babysit for some of my mom's friends.
That's cool. Having you on my team is gonna be amazing. When it's a 2-on-1 game, it's rough. You'll even the odds.
Right. You really felt for him, given your own babysitting hurdles you'd had this summer. Yeah, I'm prepared for it to be a pain, but I would do it anyway for Derek. This wouldn't rank in your top 10 days of summer vacation, but Derek was worth some hassle. After that interlude, you both continued to enjoy yourselves and your freedom until a little beeping alarm went off.
That's time!
He made his way to the lounge chair with his stuff and dug out a small portable clock. It buzzed until he found the stop button. Derek checked the time and narrowed his eyes at the glowing red numbers. He shot you a thumbs up.
let's go.
You helped him gather the towels, grab the rest of the stuff, and then tried to drip as little as possible while rushing through the halls of the complex. When you reached his apartment, he dumped everything in his arms on the ground and scrambled to find his key.
Just give me a second. I don't want to knock or anything in case Nicholas is still asleep.
He finally spied his soccer ball keychain and snatched up his keys from where they were tangled in his towel. He inserted the key into the lock and both of you shuffled inside the Suarez home. 3 heads swiveled to face the two of you, gazes being drawn to the bundles of neon towels coming in. Mrs. Suarez and Jorge were sitting on bar stools, while Nicolas perched on the counter itself with an excited grin. They were working on a puzzle. On your left, Derek leaned closer and spoke under his breath.
I figured.
He's awake.
Here we go. Quick as a blink, Nicolas scrambled on his hands and feet and zipped across the black marble at the counter. Tiny cardboard puzzle pieces scattered. Aw, poor Jorge.
Nicholas! The puzzle!
Despite Jorge's frustration, the little whirlwind didn't seem to hear. He was on a mission to reach his bigger brother, not even stopping when he hit the end of the counter! Nicolas stumbled off the edge, and Derek instinctively moved forward with a gasp, dropping all his pool stuff except for the towel wrapped around him. Mrs. Suarez caught Nicolas with her forearms hooking under his chest, snatching him from midair. Whew, good reflexes, Mom. Oof! She hugged her son, holding him securely against her body. A chorus of relieved sighs filled the room. Nicolas still paid no mind to his trail of disasters and began to squirm. He just wanted down already. Derek took another few steps forward, making his way over to the scene. Mrs. Suarez carefully held Nicolas out, her hands under his armpits, and safely set him down on his feet. Nicolas immediately wrapped his arms around Derek's legs. Derek chuckled while tugging up at his towel so Nicolas wouldn't pull it off.
Hold on, Nico, you're gonna get wet.
Nicolas giggled mischievously and snuggled closer. Derek snuck a quick peek over his shoulder back at you and shrugged. Just as warned, Nicolas now had a damp splotch on his shirt. Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
Hello. Welcome, Molly.
Jorge hummed something that could have been a greeting as he frowned at what remained of the puzzle. It was more than Nicolas, who gave no response at all.
Well.
Mrs. Suarez's tone was warm with a certain amount of humor to it. She rubbed her hands together and stood up.
Derek and Molly are in charge now. Make sure you listen to them.
Jorge sourly picked at the puzzle pieces, but gave a grumbled noise to signify he had heard.
I'm going to head off to my appointment.
She went to gather some things, officially putting you and Derek in charge. But there wasn't 1 second to settle into your new position.
We're going swimming?
Nicolas looked up and stared with huge, shining eyes. Derek reflexively stiffened. How would he escape the puppy dog look? Derek's eyebrows creased, a small sign of nerves compared to the smooth, placating sound of his voice.
No, even better.
He leaned down and lowered his voice like he was about to share a secret.
I've got a plan.
We're gonna go to the park.
Nicolas instantly frowned. He wasn't convinced by Derek's act. He grabbed at Derek's towel.
You were swimming.
Yeah, but I'm not anymore. I'm going to the park, and you can come with me.
No!
The littlest Suarez whined and stomped his foot. His hands balled up around the neon fabric harshly enough he almost took the towel from Derek. Oh, Nicolas.
I want to go to the pool. I want to see Molly's swimsuit.
What? Derek's jaw dropped. Neither of you were prepared for that one. Did you hear Nicolas right? You looked down at yourself, currently wrapped in a bright fuzzy towel. You switched your gaze to Derek's youngest brother, your brain trying to make sense of what was happening. Why would you want that?
Why does Nicolas want anything?
Jorge rolled his eyes and continued mumbling into the counter. It was obvious to him, and he couldn't believe the rest of you were taking so long to catch up.
Because Derek does.
Oh, snap! Called out! Well, Derek narrowed his eyes and whispered harshly,
Seriously?
Nicholas, Jorge, you're gonna put me into an early grave.
He took a deep breath as he stared at the ceiling. It took him a moment to face you. His voice was firm for someone at his level of embarrassment. I don't even know. This is like... It's starting off so spicy.
I must have said something about hoping you'd remember to bring your swimsuit. I was excited for us to be able to swim, so I did want you to have one. Nicholas does not actually want to see you in a swimsuit. He doesn't even know why he'd want that. He's just saying stuff.
You scratch the back of your neck as you focus on anything other than Derek or his family. The apartment had some nice plants. Pleasant, not plastic, and certainly not awkward plants. You snuck another look at Nicholas. He had crossed his arms high on his chest and squished his neck down far enough to rest his chin on his wrist.
I want to go swimming.
His pout intensified when he said it again. He was a very angry little baby. Derek tilted back on his heels, once again driven to look at the ceiling by the strain of this kid. You glanced up there yourself without thinking about it. It was a calm white color with a few light fixtures. When you squinted, you noticed something small and green. It appeared to be one of those sticky hands for kids. Was this another present from the youngest Suarez? You turned back into Derek. He appeared to have made a decision.
Alright, I promise that you can go swimming too, but only after the park. We'll go to the pool as soon as we come back.
With the promise officially made, Nicholas lit up. He snatched one of Derek's hands.
Go! We gotta get to the park so I can swim!
While Nicholas celebrated, Derek closed his eyes and some of the worried creases on his face smoothed out.
Derek, there's lunch packed in the fridge. Dad will be back before dinner.
I gotcha.
Thanks, Mom.
Have a good one.
Mrs. Suarez waved and collected the last of her things, her purse off of the side table. She ruffled Jorge's hair on her way out. You and Derek were alone with the kids.
We should really stop leaving puddles everywhere.
He gestured at the drops of water pooling at his feet. You nodded, feeling uncomfortable at not being fully dressed. You and Derek took turns changing. You went first while you could faintly hear Derek impressing on his brothers to listen to you too. He must have convinced them to behave for now, as neither Jorge nor Nicholas acted up when Derek took his turn drying off and clothing himself.
Can you get our lunch from the fridge? I'm gonna pack my gear.
No problem. You walked casually to the kitchen. Jorge hadn't moved from his bar stool even once since you'd gotten back. Meanwhile, Nicholas followed Derek like a possessed shadow that was even more energetic than the original. He zipped around, occasionally trying to place things in Derek's backpack for him. So far, Derek had said no to the rubber duck, but he had agreed to bring an extra pair of socks that Nicholas had determined were absolutely necessary.
Okay.
Got everything.
Derek returned with a backpack in one hand and Nicholas's small hand in the other.
We're going, Jorge. Ready, Molly?
Yeah.
Sure.
He pushed away from the counter and finally hopped off his chair with the enthusiasm of a plank of wood.
We're going!
Derek hid his smile at Nicholas's echo and ushered everyone outside. He locked the condo behind him and you began the trip to the nearby park. Ah, this park. The park, for the Suarez boys, was the big park for your family. Their condo complex was only a short distance to the public outdoor recreational area your mom sometimes drove you to. It was still a beautiful day outside and had only gotten a few degrees warmer from your morning swim. The field was bustling with other groups of people enjoying themselves. Derek led the way to a wide open part of the grass that no one else was using. He stopped in the middle of the field and turned 180 degrees to face the little boys behind him. He shrugged his backpack off of his shoulders and dropped it to the ground. He kneeled down to root around inside it. Jorge and Nicolas waited in place for their brother. Derek gathered a couple things in his arms before pushing off the ground with his knee to get up again. He held a football in his left hand and a soccer ball in his right.
Alright, Nicolas, Jorge, I've got to practice, but you can too. Which one do you want?
Okay.
Football!
Real ball!
You raised an eyebrow at their shouts. Derek leaned over to you and whispered with a laugh.
He means the soccer ball. It's real because it's actually ball-shaped.
Is that a problem? They want both. Derek simply grinned.
I thought so.
He tossed Jorge the football first. Jorge caught it from out of the air with one hand and began to bounce it up and down in his fingers, feeling the weight of it. Derek popped the soccer ball gently over to Nicolas, who watched his brother intently. Nicolas had to catch it with both hands. He wrapped his arms around the ball and hugged it to his chest. And, with his brothers taken care of, Derek crouched again to reveal a third ball. He brought a second soccer ball. Derek had been prepared. He then sprung back to his feet, another problem diverted.
Jorge, Nicolas, you can use this half of the field. I'll use that half. Molly can be your ref, so don't get too far from her, alright? Okay.
Jorge tossed his football in the air, preoccupied. It spun in an arc downward.
Alright! I'm gonna practice!
Nicolas embraced his soccer ball tighter, pressing his cheek into it. You wondered just how he'd practice with it when the equipment was about as big as his head. The child looked completely content with the world, but Derek's eyes narrowed. Once again, he shared some Nicolas info into your ear.
Watch him. It's not over. He copies what I say, but it's not what he means.
You snuck a peek at Nicolas. He appeared so innocent, clutching his ball and staring at a patch of clover in the grass. But you'd interacted with him enough to not question his potential for trouble. You'd make sure to keep an eye on the kid. You nodded at Derek without looking away from Nicolas.
Thank you.
You're a lifesaver.
Derek held his soccer ball in both hands and cheered.
Bye, bros! Bye!
Bye!
Derek put on a smile as he picked up his bag, tucked his soccer ball under an arm, and jogged to his side of the field. He didn't have time to lose. You stood with the younger Suarez boys, effectively turned loose. Jorge stared at you with uncertainty, while Nicolas's mischievous smirk could only make you guess what he was thinking. You weren't going to make Mr. and Mrs. Suarez regret letting you come, and you especially weren't going to disappoint Derek. You were going to watch these boys. Time to be in charge.
I'm going to play over there.
He pointed vaguely to the opposite side of the field from Derek and trotted off to entertain himself. You let him go without argument. Jorge wasn't the problem child. When you saw him settle in, throwing around his football and chasing it, you smiled. You would only need to manage Nicolas. You aimed your grin towards him, but instead of being in the clover patch, he was missing. You snapped your head back and forth until you spotted him in a fumbling dash across the grass, struggling to keep his soccer ball from slipping out of his small arms. When Derek said, "Watch him," he had really, really meant it. Well, you just had to push up your sleeves. He wasn't the first troublemaker you had ever dealt with, and he wasn't going to be the last. I'll just run over to where he is. You were thankful for your longer legs since the kid was quick. You closed the gap between the two of you and stood in front of him. He didn't look up until he bumped right into your legs. Nicolas snickered. He tried to dash around you, so you had to shift to the left to block his progress. He then went right, and you speedily sidestepped. Soon, you both were going back and forth as though you were actually playing a game of soccer, and Nicolas was trying to get past you to score. The soccer ball tumbled from his arms, and you were just totally overwhelmed. How about this? Let's play! I'm gonna get it. He squealed at the idea. He chased the ball, determined to beat you to it, and wound up to kick. He overshot the angle of his foot, and the ball bounced off awkwardly. Then you were the one after the soccer ball. It didn't go that far. You let Nicolas get it again so he could continue to gradually kick the ball across the field. He sent some strands of grass into the air along with the ball on his second go. Darn, I'm gonna get you! Nicolas cackled while bumping the ball along.
No, I'm gonna win!
When you next got close to the soccer ball, he switched strategies. Nicolas grabbed it in his hand so he could simply run for it. That's not how soccer works!
It's mine!
You laughed off his blatant rule breaking and started running around after Nicolas directly. The only times your gaze strayed from the little Suarez was when you blinked or sent the occasional glance Jorge's way. Jorge continued to enjoy his time at the park without any need for assistance, so you spent most of your energy on the mischief maker. And after smoothing out the initial bump of the afternoon, things evened out. At least things were fine until the trial known as lunch arrived. It started with the reappearance of Derek. His presence sent Nicolas into hyperdrive. He bounced on the tips of his toes and waved both his hands frantically.
Derek's back!
He tackled his older brother and latched around Derek's left leg. Jorge, like half of the entire park, noticed the shout. He jogged over to see if any important updates were happening without him. Derek winked.
Hey, bros.
What's up?
Hi, Molly. I hope you're doing alright.
As he spoke, he let his bag drop to the ground. He crouched over it and scrounged up the packed lunches. It's just great. It honestly went fine so far, so I'm having fun.
That's awesome.
You beamed back at him. Despite being a handful, you were enjoying Nicolas. He kept you on your toes.
Are you having fun, Nicolas?
Yeah!
Me too. What about you, Jorge?
Yeah.
Derek set aside 3 paper bags in the grass. One in front of Nicolas, another next to Jorge, and the third went to you. Derek kept the 4th lunch inside his backpack. He only pulled a water bottle out from it and closed the bag back up.
Okay.
Okay, Nicolas, you gotta eat now with Molly and Jorge.
Nicolas clenched Derek's jeans more desperately as he whined.
You're not gonna eat with me?
Derek scratched the back of his head and gave a longing glance back to where he'd been practicing.
Do you mind, Molly? I was hoping I'd have more time to practice.
He bit his lip, hope clear on his face. He had confidence that you could handle lunch alone. I mean, he's got to get every second he can get. He'll be fine. Sure. Good luck with your practice.
Thanks. I owe you one.
Nicolas's whimpering never stopped being high-pitched background noise. Derek ruffled his hair.
Hey, check this out.
He picked up Nicolas's soccer ball and placed it on the top of his own head. Nicolas's jaw dropped theatrically as Derek fully stood up while keeping it balanced.
Ow!
Nicolas cheered and jumped up and down, still holding onto Derek's leg. Derek bent his knees and then popped up fast enough to launch the ball in the air. He caught it on his head again. Nicolas let go of his brother to clap. Derek grinned at Nicolas, but his gaze flickered to you for a second. The show over, Derek inclined his head and let the soccer ball drop into his hands. He held it out to Nicolas.
Make sure to eat a good lunch, okay? Then you can get back to practicing.
Okay.
Nicolas spoke into the soccer ball he had cuddled to his face. He'd been starstruck enough that he couldn't disagree with anything his biggest brother said. Derek waved at you and Jorge before heading off to where he'd left his soccer ball, carrying only the water bottle with him. Jorge promptly took a seat in the grass by the lunch bags. Nicolas put the soccer ball on his head. It immediately rolled off. He just tried again. You reached over to the lunches. Each bag had a clearly written name in black marker ink. Jorge collected his bag, you had yours, and you attempted to give the last one to its proper owner. But Nicolas showed zero interest in the bag. You imagined he would have been more interested in Derek's lunch bag, even though they probably had the same meals. Jorge scoffed, knowing his brother was going to be difficult again. He took a sandwich from his bag. From looks alone, you guessed it as sliced deli turkey, a pale-colored cheese, and some veggies. With Nicolas clearly busy, you took his sandwich out for him. The sandwich was ham and some sort of orangey cheese, cheddar almost certainly. You offered the food directly to Nicolas and he still didn't bite. He wanted to play. If you eat, I'll hold the ball on your head for you. Deal? Nicolas chewed on the inside of his cheek while he carefully contemplated your suggestion. Then the focus look melted into a bright smile.
Alright.
I can't believe that actually worked. He gave you a determined nod when he was ready to switch. Your fingers fanned out as you reached for the ball and pressed it down into his messy mop of hair. Nicolas cautiously released the ball and you kept it firmly in place. He giggled ecstatically that he finally found a way to keep the ball up without using his hands. It just took another person to do it. He retrieved his sandwich and immediately stuffed a big bite into his cheeks. Chuckling, you took a glance over at what Jorge was doing. Luckily, he didn't need a hand like his brother. He was already enjoying his packed lunch, so you decided not to squander the opportunity. You retrieved your own sandwich with your free hand and dug in. It was definitely an interesting way to enjoy a meal break. Finishing the last corner of your square-shaped meal, you wondered if Mrs. Suarez had talked to one of your moms beforehand about lunch. The sandwich was made how you would have had it at home. She was either prepared or very lucky, but considering what her oldest son was like, you were guessing luck had nothing to do with it. Along with the sandwiches, there were also bags of carrots, celery, and a few cookies. Between the three of you, it wasn't long before all the snacks were gone. With nothing left to nibble on, Nicolas yawned and curled up in the grass, cuddling the soccer ball against his chest. Jorge stood up, watching his little brother fall asleep. Once he was certain that Nicolas was down for the count, he started cleaning up the trash. You admired the maturity he showed for his age. It wasn't just Derek who had that streak after all. You helped gather the trash while musing about the Suarez brothers. Derek was the oldest and who his parents relied on, while Nicolas was the baby of the family. And for a little kid, he was a force to be reckoned with. Jorge was the one stuck in the middle. Either this one or this one. Seriously, thank you for helping me with this. Jorge almost dropped the plastic baggies and used napkins he was collecting between his fingers, but he managed to regain hold of everything before it fell. Aw, you blushed, Jorge. He didn't know how to respond to your gratitude, and the longer he stood there staring at you, the more his blush darkened.
Okay. Okay.
Embarrassed, he quickly pivoted back to what he was doing before. You left the subject there, but thought he deserved more praise. The park suddenly felt empty with Nicolas asleep. He took up a lot of space despite his tiny size. Chuckling to yourself, you found a comfortable spot in the grass and scanned the area for Derek. You eventually caught sight of him running in the distance. Even from here, you could tell that Derek was persistent about his practice. He went back and forth, repeating the same set of moves, reassessing and refining his form every time. Though it wasn't long before he paused to wipe his brow with his black wristband. Derek happened to glance your way at that moment and realized that he had an audience of one. He gave a huge wave with both hands that required he cross both his arms over his head. And before you knew it, Derek's strides were bringing him back over to you and his brothers.
Phew.
That's it. I'm gonna be done with practice. I'm back.
You proudly put all of your support behind the thumbs up you gave him. A few seconds later, you even added the other thumb too, and Derek laughed, truly appreciative of your encouragement.
Thanks for watching, Jorge and Nicolas. I didn't mean for it to be so long.
I finally got to be the big sibling. It's okay. I'm happy I could help you out. The sincerity in your voice had Derek bashfully keeping his eyes on his shoes instead. Your heart rate picked up as he chose to respond in kind.
I'll probably end up saying it again, but thanks, Molly. You're a lifesaver.
Next, he shifted his attention over to his brothers. Jorge gave a little wave. He'd been waiting patiently for his big brother to wrap up his conversation with you.
We're going back.
Jorge simply got up, not needing any more guidance, while Derek kneeled in the grass to nudge Nicolas out of dreamland. A single eye cracked open at first, and then they both popped wide open when he realized who was with him.
Derek!
Nicolas sprang off the ground, wrapping his arms around his big brother like a vice grip and nuzzled into his chest. Derek gave Nicolas's head a single pat.
Let's go.
Practice was good today. Let's go home.
Let's go home.
Nicolas's hushed voice echoing his brother's put a warm smile on your face. Stretching your arms high overhead, you surveyed the area to make sure that nothing was being left behind. You were all clear, and it felt good to have another solo round of babysitting successfully under your belt. That didn't go too badly at all. With your leadership, no one got lost, injured, swallowed something they shouldn't have, or even declared that they hated you for eternity. So in your book, you'd say it went fairly well. Couldn't agree more. The 15-minute walk back from the park passed by pleasantly. The late afternoon sun fell behind you and your shadow soon stretched across the sidewalk. You wiggled your fingers and then exaggerated your hand's movement in order to watch the shadow change. Meanwhile, next to you, Derek was finally eating his lunch. Although he had to eat a sandwich with the hand Nicolas wasn't clasping tightly onto. Jorge entertained himself with the football he still carried. He periodically tossed it up into the air and caught it again. You could easily imagine how often the three of them had made this trip before, with only the three of them. But you didn't feel out of place strolling alongside the group. It felt natural. Beaming, you found your gaze settling on Derek again. You knew without a doubt that the way you felt was because of him. He was so good at making you feel welcome. It's true. Like, even though I set my character for, like, nervous crush with him, I can't help but just be, like, relaxed around him, because he's just so relaxing. He's so natural and welcoming and thoughtful and stuff. I just can't help but be like, you know, it's so nice to hang out with you. In time, you made it safely back, and Derek dropped his bag on the floor with a quiet sigh of relief. Any hope he had to take things easy for a second immediately evaporated.
We're going to the pool as soon as we come back.
Oh, he didn't forget. Nicolas's joy was palpable, parroting back Derek's promise from earlier in the day. As the words dawned on him, Derek closed his eyes and breathed deeply.
Yup, we are. Get ready.
And that was all the approval Nicolas and Jorge needed. They both dashed off to their shared bedroom to get changed. Derek sluggishly opened his eyes, but his tiredness softened when he looked at you.
It's okay.
Practice is done. If you want to stay up here until your moms can come get you, that's cool.
I wouldn't leave you like that, man. Derek gave a partial shrug and then ran a hand through his hair shyly.
We don't have to go swimming again.
I like that there's no option to stay. It's like, it's a terrible idea. Good, because it is a terrible idea. What do I want to say? Yeah. But I want to hang out with you. The tips of his ears burned red at your declaration, but he didn't turn away from you. He spoke cheerfully instead.
Thanks. Me too, Molly.
Oh, let's look at the swimsuits. Very cute. I love the dino trunks. Oh my goodness. Absolutely adorable. It wasn't much longer before the younger kids came running out to rejoin you and Derek. They both wore their neon-colored swimsuits and had towels wrapped around their shoulders. Besides, if I don't go and show off my swimsuit, Nicolas might just riot.
Awesome.
Nice job. You even remembered your floaty vest, Nicolas.
Derek kneeled down to make sure the safety device was properly secured. Nicolas stood tall with his chest out proudly. He didn't fear the scrutinization.
I did the straps for him. Perfect, thanks.
Jorge brightened just as his younger brother had. Standing back up, Derek shifted his attention to you.
Same quick change strategy from earlier?
Yeah. You darted off to get changed first. Derek nodded seriously when you returned to take over for him. He reemerged a couple minutes later and diligently went over to the counter to write something down. Curious, you inched closer.
Just gotta leave a note so Dad knows where we are, then we can go.
Oh, sounds good. Everything was squared away, as Derek was always sure to do, and the four of you marched right back out of the apartment for another excursion. By the time the distinct smell of chlorine tickled your nose, the sun had fallen low in the sky. You circled around some nearby lounge chairs and deemed them capable of keeping your things safe. Inspecting the gleaming water, you noticed that Jorge and Nicolas hadn't moved towards the pool yet. Both of the little boys were watching Derek like hawks. You'd picked up enough this afternoon to know it was because Jorge didn't want to do anything without permission, and Nicolas didn't want to do anything Derek wasn't doing.
I'm on it.
Here I go!
And Derek himself knew it too. He didn't keep them waiting. Derek offered his brothers an encouraging wave and strode over to the pool. I'll follow. Wait for me! Derek paused at the pool's edge and glanced over his shoulder. He beamed at you.
Alright. On 3. 1,
2.
3!
You simultaneously leapt into the pool, making a huge splash. After a few seconds, you made your way to the surface to take a breath. Derek, meanwhile, stayed under. The other Suarez sons followed. Jorge jumped in without any hesitation, but Nicolas sped right to the edge only to come to an abrupt stop. His toes curled around the edge of the pool and his lips were pressed into a tight frown. Nicolas tipped his head and stared down at the water, clutching his hands together. He was scared to jump. Nicolas would rather the pool come the rest of the way to him, but it wasn't being a good sport. Derek and Jorge popped out of the water with matching wide grins and droplets clinging to the tips of their hair. Neither were surprised that they were missing their baby brother.
Alright. Woohoo! That was awesome!
Nicolas's cry for help came out in a tiny, impatient squeak. He began wiggling in place. Derek chuckled and swam over to a shallower spot. The 6-year-old followed closely, toddling along the edge. When his feet touched the pool's solid bottom, Derek stood up. He kindly held his arms out towards his brother.
This is gonna be great.
Come on in, Nico. The water's fine.
Trusting him completely, Nicolas let go of his fear. He took a step over the side and walked into his favorite person's hold. Derek embraced Nicolas as he dropped against his chest. Then Derek slowly lowered him closer to the water before he completely let his little brother go. Nicolas bobbed under with a small splash and broke out again in an instant like a boy. He was bursting at the seams with excitement. Nicolas made the most of his new floating freedom by dog paddling around the shallow end. Checking on Jorge, you noticed that he was sticking to the center of the pool. He bounced himself from the floor to the surface for air and then pushed back down to do it all over again. He leapt all around in a circle. Derek rested an arm across the pool's edge and took a moment to watch his brothers too. You swam over to Derek and settled against the wall with him. You closed your eyes and sighed. The water's temperature was pleasantly warm against the cooling evening air. Derek kept his main focus on his family, though he spared a moment to tilt his head in your direction. A few beads of water trailed from his hairline down the side of his jaw.
Babysitting went as well as you thought, huh?
You hummed in response, thinking back over the day. Nicolas could be a handful, but it was something you could manage.
Honestly...
My brothers are fun. Some of the time.
He chuckled at his own joke and ran a damp hand down his face to try getting at least some of the water off. The final rays of sunlight cast a warm glow on his skin, and the pool sparkled as he finally turned his attention directly towards you. You felt toastier all of a sudden, like someone had pulled the sun back up to the center of the sky. Derek's mouth turned into his usual wonderful smile.
I don't know what I'd do without them.
Nicolas's trouble with a capital T. You sound like a proud dad. He smirked at your teasing, but it quickly lost its force as his cheeks grew pink. Derek hid his face in his hands.
I don't even want to think about being a real parent right now. Being the oldest kid is enough for me.
Shaking his head, he kept his brothers in his sight. The affection returned to his expression.
I am proud of them, though.
Jorge and Nicolas remained engrossed with their own watery adventures while you and Derek kept track of them. You were in mid-conversation when the sound of footsteps echoed off the walls surrounding the pool. Derek shot an arm out of the water and waved at the newcomer.
Dad!
Hey!
Evening.
Hello?
Dad!
Dad?
All the Suarez boys eagerly paddled over to the end of the pool where their father stood. They moved together in the water with their heads beside each other and their legs kicked out behind them like a pile of seal pups.
Welcome home.
Thank you.
Mr. Suarez's voice was sweet as he observed his children's happy faces. Eventually, he spotted you as well, and he tucked his fingers into the edge of his vest with vigor.
Oh, this is a pool party today. You know, a party should have the proper food. Let's order pizza for dinner tonight.
Yeah! Yeah!
Laughing with excitement, Nicolas started smacking the palms of his hands against the water's surface, making several bursting splashes. Jorge flicked the droplets from the tips of his fingers at Nicolas in retaliation. Chuckling over the scene, Mr. Suarez brought a hand up and held onto his chin. He scratched at his beard with his thumb.
Half cheese, half pepperoni for the first, correct? Yes!
Pepperoni!
Nicolas threw both his arms in the air as he cheered. Mr. Suarez nodded, pleased his littlest one still had predictable taste.
Wonderful.
Okay, and the meat and veggie supreme for Irene and I on the second.
He settled his gaze on Derek and you for the final decision. Oh, we have our own couple's pizza over here.
Suggestions for what the final half should be. Molly, you pick.
He floated over closer to Derek as he thought about it. More cheese, more pepperoni, more supreme, all veggies, all meat, barbecue chicken, Hawaiian. Can I get something other than pizza? I'm curious, though. Derek, what do you normally get?
Usually the barbecue chicken, but you should get whatever you want. I like the other stuff too, so don't worry.
In that case... I mean, barbecue chicken pizza is delicious. Honestly, all pizza is delicious. I'll eat any kind of pizza, as long as it doesn't have anchovies. Or broccoli or something like that. Derek gave you a big thumbs up for that.
So,
In full, half cheese and half pepperoni, half supreme and half barbecue chicken.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you, children. I'll put the order in now. I'll come back to let you know when it's ready, but until then, continue to play. Thanks, Dad. Bye.
Thank you.
You cheerily waved goodbye to Mr. Suarez. All the food talk had you amped up for dinner. Mr. Suarez closed the pool gate behind him, leaving you kids to your fun. In Mr. Suarez's absence, Derek took charge again.
Alright, you heard it. Dad's ordering pizza, so it'll be here in like 30 minutes. So think fast. What's the last thing you want to do before we have to leave the pool?
Nicolas furrowed his brow, thinking as hard as he could. He scrunched his face together in frustration when nothing came to mind. Meanwhile, Jorge put a hand to his chin and tilted his head to the side. He stared up and off into space as he considered the question. I'll leave it open for the younger kids to decide. Narrowing your gaze, you wondered who would speak up first. You crossed your arms and sat tight. The boys would have to come up with their own answers.
We can make a whirlpool.
I love doing that, that's so fun.
Yeah.
Nicolas's pupils grew huge with anticipation.
Yeah!
Nicolas giggled as Derek hooked his fingers around the vest straps. Derek started moving forward, dragging his little brother along for the ride. Jorge pumped his arms and excitedly jogged against the resistance of the water. You darted into their little conga line to get the water going even faster. Around and around you all went from corner to corner of the shallow end. It wasn't long before there was enough motion going to start a current. Nicolas was still loudly squealing when Derek let him go so he could float along in the moving water. Like a man on a mission, Jorge hopped out of the pool and barreled into the nearby pool shed. He re-emerged with a pool noodle victoriously held in his fist. Jorge jumped back into the pool with it between his legs. He surfaced and drifted along, riding the pool noodle like a cowboy riding a horse off into the sunset. You and Derek continued to push the water by running in circles to stop the whirlpool drying out. Each time Derek lapped one of his brothers in the loop, he gave them a high five. The four of you thoroughly enjoyed your time at the pool. It flew by so fast that you were surprised when you spotted Mr. Suarez cruising down to the water's edge once more.
Dinner's here. And even better, Mom's home.
Yay!
The youngest Suarez threw his wet confetti into the air. Even his dad wasn't safe from it. Mr. Suarez took it in stride and wiped his glasses against his vest. Derek was out of breath, but he beamed.
Let's go get some food.
Yeah. Mr. Suarez led the way to the apartment, and the four of you kids marched with an eager spring in your steps. Despite being wrapped in towels, you dripped water the whole way there. The savory smell of hot cheese and garlic crust was there to greet you when you arrived at the door. You could hear the musical words of Mrs. Suarez, too.
Welcome.
Hi. Hi, Mom.
Hi.
Feeling a bit awkward and out of place, you gave a tiny wave. Mrs. Suarez didn't miss it, and her voice softened as she spoke to you first.
Hello, Molly. I hope you had fun today.
I did.
We had lots of fun.
That's great.
Mrs. Suarez then went over to the kitchen where the food was set on the counter. She popped the boxes open and delightedly glanced over at her husband.
This was such a good idea. Thank you.
Mr. Suarez dipped his head in a tiny bow. He followed that by gesturing a hand towards the food.
Well then.
Come and get dinner. Youngest to oldest order.
Despite the order given, it was no surprise that Jorge was the one who moved first. You figured Nicolas would wait for Derek, even if he didn't have to. Jorge tore off a paper towel from the roll and used it to grab a slice of plain cheese pizza. He hot-footed it back over to the entryway, standing there so he wouldn't bring water any further into the apartment.
You can go next, Molly. It'll be easier that way.
The food smelled even better up close. I'll get me some slice of that barbecue chicken. You hurried back to the entryway with your dinner. Derek went next, tiptoeing over with Nicolas at his heels. He grabbed a slice of pepperoni and passed it to Nicolas. Derek then grabbed a slice of barbecue chicken for himself, but instead of going to the entryway, he went to an open space on the floor. You curiously watched as Derek laid his towel on the floor, then sat down on it, crossing his legs. Nicolas plopped down on the towel right next to him and started on one of his pizza crust corners. Solidarity with Jorge. You didn't mind eating on your feet, but you also didn't give yourself much time to think about it. Taking a big mouthful, you focused on filling your belly instead. Finally, Mr. and Mrs. Suarez got their slices of pizza. They stood in the living room in between the spots their sons had taken.
So?
How did you spend your day while we were out? We did lots of things.
In between taking big bites of pizza, the Suarez family started taking turns telling stories about their day. Nicolas recounted the events of the day with the most enthusiasm. Even though they were the same plot points from his brother's stories and the ones you witnessed firsthand, from his perspective the events were almost mythically amazing. Storytelling was hungry work, so the slices didn't last long at all. The food was chipped away piece by piece until everyone was stuffed. Nicolas laid down on the floor, limbs stretched out and still wrapped in his towel. He was completely tuckered from the day. Mr. Suarez plucked him off the floor and held him under one arm.
Bath time. Come on, Junior.
Yes, Dad.
Nicolas accepted his fate, and his arms hung limply down. Jorge crumpled up his paper towel into a ball and tossed it into the trash. He followed his dad.
Thank you.
Gregorio? Oh, is that his name? Neat. Mrs. Suarez watched them go with gentle affection in her gaze. She patted her husband's shoulder as he passed by and then strolled over to you and Derek.
And thank you for a good day's work. I appreciate you both taking care of Nicolas and Jorge today.
Her cheeriness reminded you so much of Derek's. She pointed with her thumb over her shoulder.
Dad and I will take them from here. Thanks, Mom.
You could see the wave of relief wash over him as clearly as the actual water you had just swam in.
I'll keep an ear out for the phone. Pamela said she'd call when they're on their way here to get Molly. Okay.
After that, Mrs. Suarez excused herself to go help get Jorge and Nicolas ready for bedtime. When she disappeared down the hall, Derek leaned back on the palms of his hands. He lazily rolled his head in your direction.
Hey.
We can get dressed again. Then would you want to hang out in my room until your mom gets here?
You hummed in agreement. With your visit winding down, that was a good plan.
You can get changed first.
He stretched his legs out on the floor while you stood up. You could feel a slight ache in your muscles from today's activities. It wasn't bad. You'd given your all during your babysitting adventure. Gathering your things up in your arms, you left to get changed. It wasn't long before you and Derek went over to his room for some sibling-less free time.